Good morning. Actually, it wasn't a sermon I had a word from the Lord. Just one word. And from that, here I am. So, I would like to do something before we even start today. I'd like to kind of change it up a little bit here. I'd like to give you a test this morning. Just to kind of, I want to deal with blindness today, and I want to, well, let me just give you the test, and then you'll see what I'm trying to do here. I'd like you to put up the compass headings, okay? There's 8 compass headings. All right, now there's some people that aren't really good with geography, and you can take a pass if you want today on these couple questions. But in your bulletin, there's 4 lines there, and if you would like to fill this out, or it's only 4 questions, you probably can remember your answers, but if you have the sheet of paper there, we're going to walk you through this. So you've got north, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, and northwest. Okay? Now the first question isn't going to require you to use this, but there'll be more that'll come that will. So go to the first question. Okay, here's a picture of South America. Can you recognize that? All right. Did you see there's an orange-colored country at the top that's Venezuela? Can we all fix ourselves on that? And over on the left side of Venezuela, you'll see that's Caracas, Venezuela. You probably can't see that, but it's on the very left side of Venezuela on the top. Okay, now my question is, the first question in this very interesting test is, if you went due north from there, all right, just straight north, all right, I want you to write down the city in North America that you think you'd most likely hit. Okay, just, yeah. I didn't say this was going to be easy, but, all right. South, just kind of get your bearings. You've looked at maps your entire life. You looked at globes your entire life. So it is a guess thing. Don't share your answers. I want to. If I'm going to embarrass anybody, I like to embarrass you individually. Okay, so don't swap answers. And then right next to your answer there, because I'm going to give you, I'll give you some latitude here. If you're right next door to that city or the next city to the right or left, we'll give you a pass and I'll give you credit. So if you think you're somewhere in the region of where we're going to hit going due north of Caracas, Venezuela there, then give yourself a grade between 1 and 5 on your level of confidence in your answer. Okay? All right, 0, okay. The next question. Question number 2. Okay, now I know you don't even know what this is, but that is Los Angeles. Can you see the Pacific Ocean there? You're on the west coast there, and there's Los Angeles. And right to the left there, you see you're in the water. It's on the coast of California. All right? You know where you are? Kind of? Okay, now we're going to take a trip by plane to Reno, Nevada. Now, if you can go back to the compass headings, Cochra. All right, which direction would we be heading? We're going, don't holler out nothing here. Remember, I'm going to try to hit you individually. So what direction are we heading? All right, okay. All right, it could be any one of those 8. And I'll give you on the answer here, if you're one off, like if you're one compass direction level off, you still can take credit for the answer. All right, the next one is question number 3. This one's kind of an odd one, all right? Can you recognize that? That's Italy, right? Can you see Italy there? The Adriatic. Now, the country on the right there is one of my favorite places. That's Bosnia. That's where we lived for a while. So Italy was just right across the Adriatic Sea, and that's on Paul's 3rd missionary journey. He kind of traveled up through there, so I got to look out on the water that Paul and his little boat went by, and that was kind of neat. But I want you to look at the toe of Italy. Can you see the toe of Italy? Okay. Now I'd like you to head east, straight east. Okay? Could you put the compass heading back up? We're going to go, no, I'm sorry. I want you to go straight west. It's a good thing I switched it. I want you to go due west. All right, go back to the map on question number 3. All right, we're heading west now from the toe along that longitudinal line, or latitudinal line. Okay? I want you to tell me, the best you can, what North American East Coast city do you think you're going to hit? From the toe heading west. To right around the globe till you hit America, what northeast city? And again, I'm going to give you some latitude here. If you're like one major city off or so, I'll give it to you. And again, after each of these questions, put a number 1 through 5 on your level of confidence of how well you think you might be doing. Okay? All right? All right. Question, you ready? Is that good? All right. And now, like again, most of you can remember a Panama Canal. We all know where that is in Central America? Okay. You're in a boat, and you're traveling through the Panama Canal. All right? You with me? All right. And you're thinking, what does this have to do with God or anything? But well, hopefully we'll tie this in somewhere, okay? All right. Panama Canal, we're heading through the Panama Canal, and you're probably not in a rowboat. We'll put you in a motorboat, and you're going through there. You're heading from the Pacific to, we're going from the Pacific to the Atlantic. All right? Compass heading. Compass heading within 1 notch of compass. All right? From the Pacific to the Atlantic, you're in the middle of the Panama Canal, going through the Panama Canal, your direction. You want to put the compass back up for anybody that might need it? Okay. All right. So again, if you're 1 compass tick off there, we'll still count you as good. Okay? So that's our test for this morning. How do you think we did? Terrible. Okay. And any of them, is anybody confident on any of them? You're confident? How many are you confident on? All 4. She's confident. So you want to put 5s across all 4. You're pretty confident? You confident? Number 2. Could you bring number 2 back up again? Okay, that's Los Angeles, California. You're heading towards Reno, Nevada. You want your general compass heading. Los Angeles, California, Reno, Nevada. Okay. Okay? Are we ready? Are we ready? Now, I want you to know before I start to give you the answer, I'm not trying to beat you up. I'm not trying to hurt you. This is all in love, okay? But I want you to capture a feeling here, and I hope you at least went through the exercise whether you wrote it down or not, because I want you to feel something this morning when I'm done, and hopefully this will reach it. These questions were given to me when I was on a retreat somewhere, not a retreat, but a managerial thing I went on. Here come the answers. Number 1. Answer to number 1. That was the Caracas, Venezuela one, due north. All right? If you go due north of Caracas, Venezuela, you're not even going to hit the United States. You're going to wind up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So we do this in our mind. It's called tunneling, where we line things up. And you miss America. You wind up way out in eastern Canada. Okay? So you can mark that right or wrong. Again, I'm not. Number 2, answer to number 2. This question was Los Angeles, Reno, Nevada. All right, Los Angeles, California is, if you're heading there, you're going northwest, northwest, from Los Angeles, California to Reno, Nevada. All right, anybody get that right? A couple? You're heading westerly. There's Los Angeles, California. Reno, Nevada is west of Los Angeles, just slightly northwest. Can you see it? Okay. Okay, and that one you were probably more sure of than you're letting on, because I hear more people getting upset with me. Okay? All right? All right. So, Los Angeles, California, down the bottom, right above San Diego, you have to go northwest. Yeah, and over and up a little bit is Reno. It's kind of hard to see there, but there it is. All right, the next one. Answer to the one on Italy. What are some of the cities we had? Who could? Okay. Washington. Well, Charleston. Greenville. All right. The answer to the question is Boston, Massachusetts. Boston. Yeah. Okay. And the last one, and my favorite, what? Boston. This was Boston. Okay. Italy coming across, we hit Boston. And you got all that stuff above it, which really messed me up, because you got France and you got all this, Germany is all north of there, and yet you're in Boston. Last one is the Panama Canal question. What do you think? You're actually heading westerly. Yeah, I know, it's hard to believe. But you come up into the Gulf of Panama there, and that's the part of Central America that kind of cuts straight across into South America, and you come up in there, and then you actually cut back across into the Atlantic Ocean, westerly. This does not mean you have to go south. This is something, just for you to know, this is not an intellectual test, okay? Because no matter who you test in this test, no matter who you test, no matter what their SAT scores were or what their IQ is, everybody, like the average score on this is 0. Okay, so if you got 1 right, how many people got 1 right? Okay, anybody get 2 right? Okay, so we are a little above average, some of us. Okay, now all right, we can kind of clear the screen now. We're going to actually start my sermon now, or soon. Okay, can you make that all go away? Beautiful. Thank you. We're going to be talking today about blindness. And the one thing about blindness, especially spiritual blindness, is where we're heading, is there's this nature of us to think we're right. We think we're right. We're sure we're right. And it's a lot easier to see in someone else when they're spiritually blind. Have you ever ran into somebody that's so sure they're right? Pastor, have you ever done that? Sure they're right. Positive. And only to find out they're wrong. And the thing is, you can't approach somebody that's spiritually blind and persuade them. I mean, I can show you on the screen, but even that Panama one's hard to believe, even after seeing it with my own eyes. Well, when it's not something you can put in a picture, when it's something going on inside, and you say, you're doing something here that's wrong, that's not right, it's so frustrating because you can't get them to see. There's an expression I use, and I'm going to dare to use it here, and I'm very sorry before I use it, but there's an expression we have that somebody's got their head up their butt. Have you ever heard that? I mean, can we handle that? All right? It's a visual there I want to put in your head. Okay? Thank you very much for that. Yes. Never going to be able to speak again. But anyway, think about that for a second. And when you're in that condition, you're blind. You're blind. And whatever you see is pretty, not so pretty, yucky. Not yucky. But the thing about being spiritually blind is you tend not to notice it in yourself. And what do you do? I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about causes in a minute, but what do you do when it's you? And how do you know if you are? Because the chances are, if you're spiritually blind, or in many cases you have blind spots in your life, you don't see them. You know why you don't see them? Because you're blind to them. You just don't see them. And so we're trying to walk on with the Lord, and the only way sometimes we can know when we're blind is when we start bumping into things. But we don't bump into things physically. In the spiritual, we're bumping into things like maybe in our marriage. You know, we're bumping into each other. And there's blindness going on there somewhere. But it's certainly not me. Certainly not me. Well, I want to tell you a story now, going back to the summer of 2000. It was summer I was arriving in New York City at JFK Airport in a van that I had just driven from Western New York, 8 hours through the night. We left about 10 o'clock after the ceremony they had at Elam for sending us off on a mission trip to South Africa. I was elected to drive the van, and we were taking a van, and we were taking 16 teenagers to South Africa. That's what I was doing. So I pull into JFK Airport, and I had not slept in 3 nights, really. I maybe had 3-4 hours sleep in 3 days. So I pulled in. I actually had about 12 minutes of sleep somewhere somewhere in New York around Cornell, New York. I had about 14 minutes sleep, but that was it. I pull in, and I am more tired than I probably have ever been in my entire life at this point. And I go into I brought my kids in. We were scheduled for a 9:45 flight, so I'm going, yes, I'll be out. I'll be able to just die in my sleep, go to sleep and just pass out. And only to find out that they had messed up our reservation, and we weren't leaving till 11:45 that night. So now I've got 16 teenagers in the airport of JFK, one of the largest airports in the world, and I am so done. So done. And they, of course, were perfectly behaved. So all day long, I'm there, and I'm just getting more and more tired, if that's possible. And so 11:45, I finally walk onto the airplane, find my seat, which was, after having a nice seat in front, I was moved because the guy sitting next to me was even bigger than I was. And they said, that's not going to work. And I said, you're right, it's not. So they moved me into the back seat of the section. This is my first and only ride on a 747. And I was in the middle of the section of 5 in the middle, crammed in like this. Little Randy, sitting in the chair, bigger than I am now, believe it or not. And I don't know how long it took, but I went into a deep, what I would call coma. I went so deep. I mean, you heard of REM. This was like miles below REM. I was unconscious like nothing else. The next thing I remember was I was coming out of this fog, and there was some noise out of this ear here, and I didn't know where I was. And all of a sudden, that little screen on the seat in front of me, I could see a little airplane flying over that was dead center in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And it was at 30,000 feet. And they're calling for oxygen. Oxygen, oxygen. And I knew that we were going down. The plane was going to crash. I just knew it. And from the tip of my toes, this motion of panic, terror, and fear began coming up and covering my entire body. If anybody would have just come up and said, are you okay, and touched me, I would have freaked, because I was every cell in my body. Now, I've come to know that this is called a panic attack. I'd never heard of a panic attack. And up to that time in my life, I lived in control. I was in control. Okay? And now I had no control. Okay? Now, prior to this, I was praying the Lord because, again, things weren't working. And I can look back and call it what it was. It was spiritual blindness, but things weren't working. And yet, it wasn't me. It couldn't be me. I mean, I was the youth pastor. I was taking a missions trip. I was doing this and that. I was big man at work where I worked at court, and I was the manager. I had it going on. I had it together. It had to be Coral. I was sure it was Coral. So I'm praying the Lord for her deliverance, man, that she would just figure it out and really help me through this. But she's praying too. Now, her prayer was just a little different than mine. Her prayer was, Lord, and this is true, which she'll verify this. Her prayer was, Lord, kill him. Take him. When you live with somebody that knows it all and so sure and so cocky, it can wear on you a little bit, I guess. Well, that was me. That was me. Our scripture today is taken from John chapter 9, although I'm going to be kind of talking you through it and not reading it directly because it's 41 verses, and I'd rather spend a little more time in Matthew. But that day, in that plane, and then I got off in London and had another 10-hour flight that night that I was ill-equipped to take. And again, didn't know about panic attacks, so I thought I had a heart condition or whatever. I didn't know. I thought I was going to die. That day was probably right up there with the top 1 or 2 or 3 worst events and days of my life. And yet I will also say that day was 2 things: from God, and saved my life, my marriage, or began to save my marriage. So just painting that picture to show that, and basically the message there is, just because something is bad, just because something is horrible, does not mean God's not in it. A lot of times just for a second, take a pause and think about the most spiritual people you know. I don't know who they are, but if you pick 1 or 2 in your head, and I would almost assure you that they've gone through some devastating experience in their life, some horror, some horrible thing. And some of it's because of, it's brought about by themselves. But if they're in any way trying to get the Lord to work in their lives, God certainly can use terrible things, horrible things that you would think God would never do that to me in a plane. You want to bet? You want to bet? I think he might. If he loves me enough. Because you know what? I had dullness of hearing. I could not hear. My wife, believe me, is quite a persuasive speaker. She can really let you know something. And I couldn't get it. All right? And it showed up other places as well. The scripture today is in John chapter 9, and it's a story. I'll be talking about some parables in a minute, but this is a real story. This really happened. And Jesus was walking with his disciples, and I'm going to kind of tell the story because I timed it, and this would take a long time to read. But the highlights of the story are very simple. They're walking along, and they come across this blind man, and the disciples ask Jesus, "Is this man blind because of the sin of his parents, or was it his sin that caused him to be blind?" And Jesus' reply is, it's neither. This has nothing to do with that. That's not the question that we need to be asking here. The question is so that we can do what we're going to do here, or that Jesus could be glorified. And at that, he reaches down. Now, he's not done this. I've read all the things about blindness as I was preparing, and most of the time, like in Matthew 22 and 12, it takes him 1 verse to do a healing of a blind person. And he saw the blind man and he healed them. Or there was these types of people and he healed them all. But this time he reaches down, he puts some dirt in his hand and spits in it and makes a little mud. You probably remember this. And then he takes the mud and he puts it in the blind man's eyes and tells the blind man, "Okay, now I want you to go and I want you to wash in the pool of Siloam." I don't know if that's the right pronunciation, but that's what I can do here. And so the man does it, and he gets healed. Then he comes back to the place where he was, and the people are all abuzz. Is this the guy? He looks like the guy. It doesn't, and they're unsure. So they take him to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are confronted with this man that Jesus had healed. And not only that, Jesus healed them on a Sabbath, and he did work on the Sabbath. That was what this was all about. Now, how many people think Jesus could have just healed a man with a word? Probably. I thought that too. But he didn't. He did this thing with the mud and the eyes. And I'm not sure, but it seems to me that the reason he did it was to really upset the Sadducees and the Pharisees, or the Pharisees. That's my guess. He just wanted to upset them. So he did. He did. And as the story goes on, the Pharisees question the man. They pull the man's parents in. And the parents know that if they don't answer right, or if they attribute this to Jesus or give Jesus any credit, they're going to get kicked out of the synagogue. So their response is like, well, he is our son, and he was born blind, and how he can see now, why don't you ask him? They kind of pass it off on the son. And then they ask the son again. They bring him in actually twice, and there's this confrontation. And finally, the son says, all I can say is, before I was blind, and now I can see. Now, the takeaway from here, there's a couple, but one of them is Jesus is the one that can heal your blindness. It's spiritual blindness. It's the only way you can get healed of spiritual blindness is Jesus. So the last thing that's mentioned in here that I want to just note in this exchange here is when Jesus then confronts some of the Pharisees at the very end of this chapter. And he says something, or they ask him a question. And the question that the Pharisees asked him, I don't think they all were there, but this was like kind of after the Pharisees asked Jesus, well, are we blind too? They were seeing something here in the Spirit. They said, are we blind too? And Jesus' response is, well, if you think you can see, then you're blind. Okay, now, because I read this about 1,000 times this week, that really was kind of getting to me. If you think you're probably blind. And what I take away from that is if you think you see or you think you understand, or I just kind of played that, and I got that attitude again that I remember is, I got this, I get this, and you read through the Pharisees and the exchange between Jesus and the Pharisees, or not Jesus, but the men and the Pharisees. These Pharisees could not be wrong. They wanted to keep control. These are signs of blindness. I need to be in control. I need to have it together. And I thought when I started this chapter that I was reading a story about a blind man getting his sight. After reading this chapter, I am most persuaded that it's about seeing men going blind. That this chapter talks about people that can see that go blind because they can see, they're right, they got it together, and they're sure, and they're, that arrogant thing that Jesus so despises. And, the Bible talks about, how the weak things in the world confound the wise, or we are made perfect in weakness, or Paul talks about, I die daily, not I live, but Christ lives in me. There's all these pictures throughout the whole New Testament that are talking about Jesus. And what attracts Jesus is not your strength. It's not what you got and your gut. What attracts Jesus is your weakness. Have you ever heard the expression, God helps those who help themselves? I don't believe that. God helps those who can't help themselves. All right, now I'm going to take you over into the parables here. The parables, there's one parable I'm going to talk about specifically, and whenever I say a parable, a lot of times we think it's like a children's story or something like that. But when you read the parables, and I'm going to be reading or speaking from Matthew chapter 13, it talks about that later on in the chapter, it talks about how the mysteries of the kingdom, and it also says from the foundations of the earth, are hidden in the parables. Now, to me, if it's a mystery of the kingdom and if it's hidden from the beginning of time, this would be worthy of note. We tend to just take the parables and we just kind of wipe them off. But I think within this parable that we're going to read, it's very important. And there's 39 parables altogether. 30 of them are mentioned just once in the Bible. Then there's 3 of them that are mentioned twice. And there's 6 of them that are mentioned 3 times. This is one of those that's mentioned 3 times. It's in Matthew chapter 13, Mark chapter 4, and Luke chapter 8. This parable is repeated. And the one thing to note that's in Mark that I thought was very interesting, that's hinted at in the other ones, but says it right out in Mark, it says, if you don't understand this first one, how do you expect to understand all the rest? There's that comment there about this parable. There's something special about this parable, the parable of the sower, which you all probably can tell me better than I. But the parable is, and I'm going to read it. I think I'll read it from here. And he quotes from Isaiah in here too, around verse 14. And so listen through that, and that's where he talks about the eyes not being able to see. On that day, after Jesus went out of the house, He sat by the lake, and such a large crowd gathered around. I'm reading from the NET version, the Net Bible, the New English Translation. And such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat to sit while the whole crowd stood on the shore. He told them many things in the parable, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and he sowed some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly because the soil was not deep. But when the sun came up, they were scorched, and because they did not have sufficient root, they withered. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and they grew up and choked them. But other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100 times as much, some 60, and some 30. The one who has ears had better listen." Okay, now when the disciples came to him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he replied, "You have been given the opportunity to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven." Just remind you, Jesus' disciples are given the power to know the secrets of the kingdom. So that's us, those of us that have accepted Jesus as Lord. "For whoever has will more be given, we will have an abundance. But whosoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. For this reason I speak to them in parables. Although they see, they do not see. Although they hear, they do not hear, nor do they understand. And concerning them, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled this day," and he quotes it here, "You will listen carefully, yet will never understand. You will look closely, yet you will never comprehend. For the heart of this people has become dull." Or we talk about hardness of heart. "They are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes, so that they would not see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But your eyes are blessed because they see, and your ears because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. So listen to the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away, or snatches what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed sown on rocky ground is the person who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, but he has no root in himself and does not endure. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, immediately he falls away. The seed sown among the thorns is the person who hears the word, but worldly cares and seductiveness of wealth choke the word, so it produces nothing. But as for the seed sown on good soil, this is the person who hears the word and understands it. He bears fruit, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. A lot of times we look at this and we say, well, which ones are the saved ones? Which soil is talking about people that are saved? And I don't think that's what this particular verse is about. But it is about a prepared heart. The soil is the man, the heart. And I think it's clear that the only way a heart can become ready is to be the last soil. And how does a soil become a good soil? What has to happen? Broken. It needs to be broken. And I think that's the word that the Lord has for us today we all have blind spots. We all run up against things in our lives. A lot of times things aren't working right, and we want to have a soil or a heart that's prepared to receive what God has for us, so that the seed lasts, it grows, it flourishes, that there's fruit. The Bible says you will know them by their fruit. All right, and you will. That's a sign of sight, is fruit in one's life. And a lot of times there's things blocking us from having fruit in our lives that shouldn't be blocking us. And when I was sitting in my seat as I was getting ready to stand up, I was going to start with what I'm about to say. This is, I think it connects here. The Lord brought two Bible guys to my mind, Paul and David. And both of these guys did horrible things. David did horrible things. He's the one that sent that man out to war so he could sleep with the wife, and then he wound up getting the guy killed because things weren't working out for him. And Paul, was all about persecuting the Christians, was holding coats at Stephen's thing. These guys were bad, by any measurement. A lot of us, I think, are here, and there's these excuses because we're not being productive and fruitful, or we're not engaging God because there's things in our life that we're thinking, God can't use me. And we check ourselves off, we check ourselves out because he can't use me because you don't know what I've done. You don't know, you don't have going on here. And yet those were two of the guys that either the apple of God's heart, or apple of God's eye, or Paul writes, pretty much half the New Testament or more. Okay, and I just see this church as getting a grip, recognizing our blind spots, seeking them. The thing that happened back when I had my panic attack, which was the beginning of God being faithful to beat me when I need it, and continuing today to do that, is a prayer that I would pray. And because even in my being assured that it was all Coral's fault, and by the way, Coral, I meant to recognize you when I get up here, but I know that I don't want to bring attention to you like I'm doing now, so I'll stop. But when I was praying before that, Lord, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. And for some of us, that might be all we need to pray, because, again, I think that some of our blindness we're not going to see. But if our prayer is, Lord, do what you got to do, that might be a start. And when we see things come and start hitting us, and things, don't be so quick to say, oh, I'm being attacked. Because when we run into hardships or we run into this breaking process, we really come with two choices we have. Either we can get really bitter, or we can start getting better. It's going to go one way or the other. When God starts dealing with us, we come up against this thing, and we have to choose how we're going to respond to the dealing. First of all, we may or may not recognize it, but an attitude of our heart will come through. But a willingness to be broken, to be humiliated or humble, is identifying ourselves with Christ. Because in our weakness, he is made strong. And I would just like to encourage everybody this morning to just open your heart to hear what God is trying to do. Because I just believe that we're on the brink. I mean, this service today was really cool. It's the first time I got down here. I'm usually up there. And just the worship was good, and the word that the Lord had for us through prophecy was good. It's great. And I just really feel that God wants to do something in us. But as a church also, he wants to break us, and I think he has been. We've gone through a lot as a church. But it's in that brokenness. If we can stay broken, I think we're going to see the life and the fruit that God wants for us here. So maybe you could help close in prayer, because I think I'm done.